Mike Sierra 1
can't handle the truth.
You're a cheat and a swindler. That's what you are. How can you do a thing like this?
I am authorized to assure you these rumors are based on hysteria and are absolutely false. I repeat, these rumors are absolutely false.
Welcome back, and thank you for joining me once again as I take another look into the relentless lies of Mike Zero. It really is difficult to know where to begin when it comes to shining a light on Zero's ineptitude, as he is unable to bring true news to those who want or need to seek it. Most of the time it starts back a few weeks, months, or even years when something said back then gets tossed to the wayside, when a new iteration of his news in the present makes its way back onto the shelf labeled clickbait. The thing is, Zero has now moved into a whole new area of things to lie about, but the core of his stories will always remain the same, regardless of what and who they might end up being about. For example, according to Zero, Brie Larson was to pen her own ideas for The Acolyte and was going to have a great deal of input into how her character was portrayed. This was then dragged over and used for Phoebe Waller-Bridge and how she would have a say in how her character was also portrayed in Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. And in just a few weeks or even less of going on about Phoebe, he has now latched onto Rachel Zegler, who will be playing Snow White in a new adaptation of the 1937 classic animated film of the same name from Disney. Again, as with all my videos, this isn't about the whys and wherefores of what's right and wrong with the output of Disney or Lucasfilm. My views are purely about Zero, and the lies he ends up weaving around the films, the TV shows, and those that star in them.
Jonathan, who is the discount version of Prince Florian in this film, tries to confront Snow White to prevent her from confronting the Queen and insists that they do it together. This is where Snow White actually shoves Jonathan on the muddy ground, telling him to stay put as she takes on the Queen with the 7 dwarves. This, of course, was a story pitch created by Rachel Zegler that was approved by the writers and even the director Mark Webb and creators of the film, and that Jonathan sits back after getting pushed down into the mud during the thunderstorm. On top of this, the sequence is connected to one of the 3 endings that were filmed for Snow White 2024. We talked about that a couple of days ago. Yes, there were 3 endings that were filmed for Snow White.
It's a popular theme for Zero videos, and it would be around this point that he would also have Kennedy involved, but this is a Disney production, so I can't see how he can wangle her into what's going on in Snow White, but I wouldn't be surprised in the slightest if he tried. I also included him talking about 3 endings for this film. Whether or not it stays at 3 endings remains to be seen. Before I move on, I briefly want to return to Phoebe Waller-Bridge for a moment, and something that Zero always manages to leave out of his videos when it comes to her involvement in not only Dial of Destiny, but the Bond movie, No Time to Die. During an interview with Vanity Fair, Daniel Craig was very clear on where he stood with Phoebe when he said the following to reporter Jonathan Dean. Craig said the following: "Look, we're having a conversation about Phoebe's gender here, which is f***ing ridiculous," Craig said. "She's a great writer. Why shouldn't we get Phoebe onto Bond? That's the answer." He went on to add, "I know where you're going, but I don't actually want to have that conversation. I know what you're trying to do, but it's wrong. It's absolutely wrong. She's a f***ing great writer, one of the best English writers around." I said, "Can we get her on the film?" And that's where I came from. Regardless of whether Craig was right or wrong getting Phoebe involved with No Time to Die, it remains that she was asked and she took the gig, so any blame that gets thrown around about the film can't be solely thrown at Phoebe's feet. Plus the fact that Broccoli herself also gets on well with Waller-Bridge, as they share common interests, is also another factor that gets overlooked. And by all accounts, Broccoli is very protective when it comes to Bond, so must have agreed with any ideas that Waller-Bridge had. There are always 2 sides to every story. It still might not be what most want to hear, but at least you would have a choice on how you now view something because it's just not someone's forced opinion. Here is another prime example of fake news reappropriation, as Zero once again uses pretty much the same titles, but more glaringly, the same content. It wasn't enough that he was paid first time round for a weak story of his own making, he just dug up the same thing again, and with the arrogance that only Zero exudes, he just doesn't care, just as long as he gets paid.
So, when we were creating Mando Season 3 and we finally made it to principal photography to begin shooting on the hardest things, and one of the hardest things that I think myself and Dave had to deal with on set by Kathy Kennedy were specific instructions to not allow George Lucas on set for the third season. She didn't want his presence on any set either in studio or on location, so that we could have a proper vision in place with no critiques. And it's what we did with Star Wars Ahsoka. We made sure to not make this big mistake here with the series, and we did the best we could with the show. But not allowing George to visit the set, even for Season 3 of Mandalorian, was very difficult for us, because we do rely heavily on George for parts of our vision that we want to accomplish. She had informed myself, Dave, and many others that were working on the third one that she didn't want George around because she didn't want any kind of cast or crew to be encouraged by different ways of storytelling or ideas and concepts provided by George himself to be used for the actors and actresses on set for the last season.
Here are those clip dates in the order they appeared. June 12th, June the 16th, and the last clip came from a video uploaded on the 20th of July, almost a month later. The titles weren't too dissimilar, but the content in all three videos was the same and just reinforced a fake situation whereby Lucas wasn't allowed near the sets of Mando or Ahsoka. We know that he has visited the set for Season 1 and 2, but just because he was never seen on set for Season 3 doesn't make him an outcast. Let's now take a look at the inability of Zero to see what is actually going on before it happens. He always mentions behind closed doors, as if he knows what's being said, about what, and even who. The thing is, he hasn't got a clue, and that becomes even more evident when he is unable to bring that one thing to bear, and that's any kind of proof. Take this wonderful example, and it's a bit like what we touched on a moment ago about Lucas. When there is truth involved, there are pictures, there are articles to read. When Zero tells you that Lucas wasn't allowed on set for Series 3 of Mando, where were the articles saying pretty much the same thing from other outlets? The thing is, there were none. On the 13th of June, Bob Iger did a rather lengthy interview on CNBC, where he was questioned about all things Disney. He was asked about Marvel and Star Wars in regards to pulling back to find focus and contain costs. The very next day, Zero said this.
Well, we do have this cost containment plan, and it's all about cutting back on our funds on various projects. That we are creating content for things like Marvel, Star Wars, and more, as well as our Disney films that so many have loved over the years, and even many aspects of our streaming market that we want to fine-tune and make some adjustments. You have to call it like it is. Right now it's about spending less and making less, and that is only going to be more prominent throughout the rest of this year as we lead into 2024. We have thoroughly examined the Marvel content we have been putting out, and we know immediately that we had to cut back on those films and shows, not just from a business model perspective, but also from a creative standpoint.
Other than spending less on what we make and making less, Iger never said anything remotely similar to what Zero stated. And staying with Iger, I'm going to highlight Zero's lack of clairvoyance yet again.
It resulted in an uproar of different board members arguing against others that Kennedy is giving Disney a bad image for the company and is only going to create more damage to Star Wars and Lucasfilm as a whole. This is said to have also resulted in more pressure being put on by Bob Iger, since his job is on the line as CEO as well.
On the 7th of July, Zero, the one who knows about everything that's happening in the great big wide world of Disney and Lucasfilm, exclaimed that Bob Iger's job was now on the line. And after that announcement from Zero, Disney made their own announcement 5 days later. Well, that's all I have for you today, and I'll leave you with this. If you believe the language of those who are trying to deceive you, you will end up deceiving yourself. Until the next time, take care, and I'll see you again soon.